Hello and welcome. My name is Scott Suskovic. I'm pastor at Christ Lutheran Church, and welcome to this podcast that we call Deeper Dive, in which we take a look at the previous Sunday's sermon and go at a deeper level for a great conversation. We're glad you're here. Hey there, thank you for joining us for the podcast here. We're wrapping up our sermon series called A Living Hope, based on 1 Peter. 5 sermons that covered that book. I don't feel that we had enough. Pastor Scott here, joined by
Pastor Adrian.
And you were batting cleanup here as you had the last of this sermon. And I thought it was great. What I loved about it is that you had some great illustrations. You had the nun who just had that presence of peace about her. You had the story of Churchill about never give in, a memorable speech at his alma mater. And then I really loved the end in which you had that illustration about chipping away at that piece of stone so that they were shaping it here so it could fit there. And talking in terms of how God shapes us, oftentimes through suffering, to be able to prepare us so that we fit in there. So good use of illustrations, great use of humor. What I like about your humor is that it's not overwhelming. You're not doing a stand-up comic routine in which people are rolling in the aisles. It's a little chuckle. And it gets us right back to the text. And then you really worked the text very well. So how about you? Just give us a 30-second kind of review about the main point as we get into our podcast.
Yeah, the main point of mine was to look at suffering that we expect, and suffering in particular with Christ, that it's in the likeness of Christ in which we suffer. So I wanted to find that niche of distinguishing different sufferings, and to say that Peter's saying when we suffer like Christ,
Not if,
but when, right? That when we suffer like Christ, we suffer with Christ. And in that way, that's suffering with Christ in the story, so we share in Christ's glory, which means that it's that victory, it's that hope that we have, that there's something more to, yes, when we finish this life, but here and now. It's meant to be here and now also.
Yeah.
So how to suffer well. That was my hope, to say, how do we suffer well as Christians? And to do that, knowing that is part of what makes us how we know that we're in Christ.
right. And Peter gives us some good insight about how to suffer. You remember when Paul talked about grief, and he says, brothers and sisters, I don't want you to be ignorant about those who have fallen asleep, that have died. We grieve, but we don't grieve as those do who have no hope. So Paul went on to talk about how our grief is similar with the tears and the heartache, but it's a different kind of grief. I would say Peter's doing the same thing here. We don't go through life like a China doll smiley face that you mentioned at your sermon, nor do we go through our suffering in such a way that it just completely destroys us. We grieve differently, but I think that we suffer differently. Now, Peter gives us some insights. The first one, he says, don't be surprised. Don't be surprised, brothers and sisters, you're going to suffer. So the first thing is different for our Christian is that when suffering happens, with bad things, when calamities, when tragedies, a lot of people say, whoa, why me? Why has God abandoned me? How can bad things happen to me? I'm a good person. We should not be surprised when suffering happens.
Yeah. I think that was true for the time, of course, with the Greek-Roman culture, but also for us when Pastor Ryan talked about how the doctor from India was like, Americans are always surprised.
Yeah. Yes.
What? I'm not feeling well? This is ridiculous. What? I thought that was really good.
That's the first thing that Peter says. Don't be surprised. Don't be an
Right.
American when bad things happen and I get a hangnail. I shouldn't have to suffer. All right. Second thing he says, if we are in Christ and we are to emulate his life was marked by suffering, ostracism, humiliation, not to mention going to the cross. So if Christ is the head and we are the body, we should expect to suffer. If the head is going to suffer, the body is going to suffer as well. So it is to emulate the suffering. Not that we run out and seek suffering so that we can emulate Christ, but it is part of being in the Christ head.
Yeah, right.
All right, so how do we suffer differently from the world? We're not taken by surprise.
Right.
It is suffering like Christ. It seems to me the third thing, there's something in the text. Help me remember this. There's something in the text about the glory. Didn't Peter say something about sharing in the glory of Christ?
Yeah, I think that's at the end of chapter 4, going into 5, that we share in that glory, that we remember the rest of the story, that Christ's suffering wasn't the end. And that's for us too. The suffering is not going to last forever.
Right.
And there's meaning to it. And I get the sense that's what Paul's saying about we grieve but not without hope, that people who don't have faith, a lot of times, members here will say, I have a friend or family member, they lost someone, they're not involved with church or faith, and they can't find any meaning or way out of it. It never ends.
The spiral.
Yeah, it's a
spiral
spiral.
down.
There's nowhere to go except a spiral, where with someone of faith, when you put your faith in Christ, you have an option. There's another alternative. There's another reason. There's something else happening. And I think it's the same with hope, that you can't find any meaning with it.
Right.
If there's nothing beyond that. If you take Christ out of the equation, why would you suffer? It's futile.
Yep. I think that's true. I think so. Our suffering is different. It is, what do we say, to not be surprised, to emulate the Christ. It is part of the glory, and there is a purpose to it. Now, that one we can have a whole nother podcast on about, my suffering for this awful thing. Did God send it for a purpose? Whatever else. We get into a little bit of a theological conundrum really quickly when we talk about being shaped, that the suffering is sent by God to shape us. And we don't want to quite go down there. I mean, I understand what you were saying in the sermon, that it just naturally shapes us. It's not God with the chisel and the hammer sending these awful things for us. Would you agree?
I think so. Yeah, because I think, we want to talk about general suffering and how we have different suffering that's human related, but we can still suffer with hope.
Yeah.
Where I took the perspective of a particular type of suffering, like persecution, all the different ways we're persecuted for our faith. And I think that's why it's compared to athleticism.
Run the race.
Yeah, run the race. I think there's a reason for that, because when you're an athlete and you're preparing for something, there's a reason for it. It's everything you endure and suffer is for an outcome. And I think Peter's saying there is an outcome to our faith, which may be hard for us to talk about.
That's good. And that's part of this difference of suffering. We understand that our suffering, whatever that may be, is short-lived. When you compare that to eternity, when we compare that to the crown of righteousness, the prize that is yet to come, it is incredibly short. For the unbeliever, when they're in the midst of that suffering, it's as if they can't even remember a time when I wasn't suffering. I've always had this hangnail. I've never been without it. And the reality is, it's short. I know it's painful right now, but it's short. And I think that's the perception of the Christian about this will pass, either in this world or the next.
It's a fleeting moment compared to the eternity that can be here and forever.
Now, I want to push you on something else. You just barely touched upon it. We could do a 5-week sermon series on it, but Peter gets very practical. He says there's going to be suffering, there's going to be persecution, and then he gives 3 examples, like in chapter 2, I think it was, 2 or 3, when he says the government. All right? There's going to be some persecution. Expect it. The second one came to in work. Now, he used the example of slavery, but it's really about obeying your master, your boss, and then the third one was in a marriage, if the two of you are not on the same spiritual plane. So he gives 3 examples on the horizontal plane in which you're going to experience some suffering, persecution. But in chapter 5, he gets vertical on it. And he talks about the suffering that doesn't happen between us and other people, us and circumstances. There's a supernatural suffering going on. He says, just be aware. Be aware, be on the lookout, because the devil, that roaring lion, is looking for someone to devour. So let's go there for just a moment. I don't think Peter is talking allegorically. I don't think he's using a hyperbole. I think he went horizontal with government work and marriage, and then he went vertical, that there's a reason for that persecution because evil is real in this world. Mm-hmm. What do you think of that?
Yeah, you make a really good point. Right. And I think that goes with this concept that we often overlook of principalities and powers. That's the evil part of the larger evil that is in creation, in the world. That's a reality. And I think he wants early Christians to be aware that we are persecuted when we're in Christ because that Christ's purpose was a larger cosmic purpose.
And just as the devil was attacking Christ, whether, in the temptation in the wilderness all the way to the Garden of Gethsemane, that devil continues to do the same thing here. Ephesians 6 says, our battle is not against flesh and blood, but against the principalities that you mentioned. So I wish Peter would have gone just a little bit more in detail there. And to be able to talk a little bit about some of the tactics, some of the strategies of the devil. Mm-hmm. The devil's not complicated. Mysterious, maybe, but not complicated. He only has a couple of tricks in his bag. Oh, well, I'm thinking the first one is, what we heard in the Garden of Eden. But his first trick is just to twist the truth. Just to twist the truth enough that you begin to doubt the goodness of God. I think the second one is that he's the father of lies. Mm-hmm. And so when that voice wakes you up at 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning, that isn't a cheerleader telling you what a great job you did today, but in fact tells you, you're an idiot, you did it wrong, you really messed up today, you are not worthy to be called a pastor. I think that's from the lies. I think that's one of the tricks, making us doubt and lying about who we are before a holy and gracious God.
Yeah, wow. And I agree. And I think part of his deception and the lies is also the facade. Like we can't see through something that looks great, but behind it, the truth of it is not how it presents.
Right.
The devil's an angel of light, and it makes sense. Like, oh, that makes sense, or that looks good.
Right.
That seems right, but that doesn't mean that it is. So it's.
I would think another trick is division. Mm-hmm. I think the devil will take the smallest, most minute issue and blow it up and create division between people. And we see this in churches all the time, that churches will divide because, I don't know, the color of the carpet or the spending of this dollar or the curriculum in the 3rd grade Bible study. The devil will find that minutia and find any way to divide us.
Blow it out of proportion.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah, that makes sense. And the image he has to help us kind of understand the constant presence. Like it's always possible to be tempted and to give into that temptation.
Right.
I think it's always encouraging. And I think it was interesting that it comes right after the verse about casting your anxiety on.
Right.
It's like, don't relax, but don't relax too much because you got to still stay alert.
That's good.
And aware that you can't just let it go and then think all's well. You still got to stay on your toes. So we're always in training. We're always need to be aware. So I thought that was a really kind of is interesting in the text.
So if Peter would have gone just a little bit further into that, I can see him say, "Stay awake, stay alert." The devil prowling. He's gonna try to divide you. He's gonna try to lie and make you no longer believe who you are as a child of God. He's gonna make you doubt the goodness of God. And when that happens, don't fall for it.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Don't fall for it. You just kind of look that devil in the eye and say, "Oh, you silly little devil, you. I know your trick."
That's right. I see you. Get out of here.
Yeah. Well, it was a good sermon series, and I think we wove in that living hope. And that went all the way to the end as he presented a nice doxology about all praise and honor and glory that goes to God. Yeah. Well, thanks for wrapping up the sermon series for us. I think it went really well. We're getting into a new sermon series on Sunday called Abundant Living.
Stewardship.
Stewardship. Do you live out of scarcity or abundance? Come and see. Thanks for joining us for Deeper Dive.